what would a soul be met with to push one such as you? The master in his garden. The one who has learned the purpose of his days spent hardening his skin and conditioning his bones. Show me what rage could linger in a mind so tempered.
Our Warframes are often crafted in the image of a certain theme or archetype, often rooted in history, other works of fiction, or just the general RPG roles we're used to seeing in other games. Should they be designed well, they'll tend to play in ways that line up with their assigned archetype. Baruuk's theme of the calm but lethal martial artist, or pacifist monk, is one such archetype that I've always been incredibly fond of, even outside of Warframe. His self-discipline and reluctance for violence is in no way tied to his capacity for violence. In truth, Baruuk is easily one of the most hyper-lethal frames you can obtain. And the interesting thing is, the way his design archetype was implemented allows for the general gameplay of Warframe to sort of manifest the duality of his theme in a very natural and clever way. And what I mean by that is Baruuk performs at his best in high-level content, where Baruuk can feel pressured, and where there's plentiful enemy spawns that are capable of competing with and even pushing Baruuk's restraint levels. In lower level missions, with fewer enemies that aren't as dangerous, he'll actively struggle to gain momentum. It's as if Baruuk himself knows that these low density, beginner level, star chart, non-endless missions aren't even remotely threatening to him, so there's no reason or need to show his lethality. He's an example of a frame that's pretty focused on excelling in the few things he's built for. You could branch him off to do one or two other things, but generally, if you're picking Baruuk, your mission statement is to reduce the damage you take, and completely overwhelm the enemies with the damage you do. He does have a few options in how exactly he wants to deal that damage, as well as flexibility in what types of damage he wants to deliver, but even with these choices to pick between, Baruuk doesn't really care to specialize in a variety of roles. I'm still here to show and demonstrate the capabilities and limitations of his kit, but it's my opinion that Baruuk is best put to use focusing on what he excels at, which boils down to incredible survivability via damage reduction, and dishing out ludicrous levels of room-clearing damage. Baruuk has 3 abilities that focus on damage evasion, crowd control, and damage reduction, and 1 ability that focuses on damage. The first 3 are responsible for keeping him alive, managing the enemies, and reducing his restraint, which is what grants him access to his 4th ability. The more enemies you have to deal with, the easier it is to manage and maintain his 4th ability, as the enemies are what ultimately influence the restraint reduction. His capacity for doing damage with his first 3 abilities is practically non-existent, and his 4th ability is what's going to be doing the real damage. There are certain aspects of the first 3 abilities that can clash or interfere with each other, lightly hindering their effectiveness, and this is one of the main things I've heard complaints about when watching others cover Baruuk. And while they're worth mentioning, these details have never caused me that much trouble, but I will still point out these examples when we go over each ability. I've seen these clashes in synergy as kind of an extension of Baruuk's theme. Maybe somehow it's symbolic or representative of his inner conflict with violence or something to that effect. His 4th ability is indeed an exalted weapon, which does mean you get to dictate a lot of its qualities and can directly influence its output and cater it to certain applications. but there are still a few general rules that we all kind of agree upon when modding it, so I'll do my best to make sure that this guy doesn't suddenly turn into a how to mod your melee weapon kind of guide, but it is a melee weapon, so we will get into that a little bit. You can get the blueprints and parts for Baruuk from Vox Solaris. This means you're going to either need to be good enough to do the Profit Taker fight yourself, or have a friend that you can leech off of for the standing. This also means you're going to have to supply the toroids to rank up as well. You can get his main blueprint at the 2nd rank of Agent, and you can get the other parts at the 3rd rank of Hand. All of his blueprints cost 5,000 standing, so overall you should be expecting to shovel out around 20,000 standing total. In order to build Baruuk, you will need resources from various activities found in the Orbalis. You're going to need 3 Sola, Vega, and Calda toroids, and each set of 3 will be going to a different part. You're also going to need some Hispasium alloy, so get the blueprint from Smokefinger, as well as the parts for some rare fish and even some rare gems. The gem blueprints you'll need are the Radiant Zodium blueprint, sold from Smokefinger at the 3rd rank of Doer, and the Marquis Thist blueprint, sold at the 4th rank of Cove. The fish parts will be acquired from the Tromizon and the Cinethid. You can get these parts to drop from the Exploiter Orb, but each one is listed at 50%, so I don't know if you're going to get both of them in one go. And they're going to drop in groups of 7 to 8, I'm pretty sure. Personally, I think you're better off just fishing for them. The Tromizon is found in pond hotspots during the cold cycle, and the Cinethid is found in cave hotspots in both the cold and warm cycles, but it prefers warm. I do recommend using the appropriate bait when fishing for both of these. And keep in mind that no matter their quality when caught, they will only give 1 part needed for Baruuk when disassembled by Biz. It's going to be best to get 5 Cinethids and 10 Tromizons in one trip if you have the time. You can get the bait for both fish from Biz, the Tromizon bait at the 3rd rank of Doer for 300 standing, and the Cinethid bait at the 4th rank of Cove for 400 standing. If you plan on getting Baruuk the legitimate way, it'll probably take you a few days or even weeks to rank with Vox Solaris, and you will be expected to go through pretty much everything Fortuna has to offer. This wouldn't be a big problem if Fortuna wasn't a miserable experience, at least in my opinion. At the time of writing, I really recommend you farm for his Prime variant instead. Here are the relics he drops from as of the 7th of September 2023. Just be aware that these change fairly frequently. As far as farming relics, there's plenty of resources you can go to as far as videos and articles go. Generally, I believe people choose a mission that drops the relic tier people are going after. I won't go too far into it, but I will leave a link in the description to a page in the wiki that catalogs relic drop rates by mission. And I'll be completely honest, even if you're watching this at a time when Baruuk Prime is vaulted, I might just suggest you learn how to farm some platinum instead, so you can either buy his Prime from someone who has him, or just buy his base variant. And if you don't want to do that, wait for him to show up in the circuit rotation. His base farm isn't impossible, mind you, it's just a bit of a commitment and the going is a bit rough. But if it's the only way for you to get a Baruuk, just know that I believe in you and you can do it. For comparison, here's the Baruuk Prime requirements. The biggest issue here is the Argon Crystal, Nitan Extract, and the Tellurium, all of which aren't even that bad. Baruuk has 75 base health, scaling to 225 at rank 30, 100 base shields, scaling to 300 at rank 30. He has an above average energy rating at 200 base, scaling up to 300 at rank 30. He carries 175 armor, and has an above average sprint speed of 1.2. He comes with a Naramon, or a dash polarity, in both the Aura and Exla slot, and he has 2 Vazarin, or D polarities. The Prime variant is only slightly different. It possesses a higher base shield, starting at 125, scaling to 375 at rank 30. It carries higher armor at 225. The Aura and Exla's polarities are the same, both have a dash, but he also has a Naramon, or a dash, a Vazarin, another D, and a Matarai, or a V polarity. Other than that, like most Prime frames compared to their original, there's not a ton of difference. And now we move on to the first part of his kit. Baruuk's passive is his restraint meter. All of his abilities have a set value that affect this meter, and all of the ability modifiers like strength, efficiency, duration, range, etc. have no impact on the values that each ability reduces the restraint meter by. So no matter how much you push or dump any of these stats, these values are static. I'll make these values known once we get to each ability. This next little bit's important. Reducing Baruuk's restraint will grant damage reduction based on how much has been eroded, up to a maximum of 50%, and that's when it's completely reduced. Do not sleep on that 50%, especially in higher level content. It has the potential to make a very big difference. This additional 50%, stacked on top of the additional damage reduction he gains from his 3rd and 4th abilities, gives Baruuk the highest damage reduction potential out of all the Warframes in the game. With his kit alone, Baruuk can achieve a total of 97% damage reduction. If you add adaptation onto that, it reaches all the way up to 99.7%. And just like with the static erosion values, I'll cover each instance of damage reduction his abilities produce, and show you how they stack together so you can gain a full understanding as we progress. Baruuk channels 25 energy to toggle his Elude ability, draining an additional 2.5 energy per second. Elude grants Baruuk 100% dodge chance for all hard attacks that approach him within a 180-degree angle in front of him. The dodge angle is relative to the direction Baruuk himself is facing, and is not influenced by the player camera at all. If Baruuk attacks in any way, the evasion stops, and you will be unable to reduce restraint, but after a short delay of 0.2 seconds after his attack is finished, Elude will continue with his normal behavior. Transferring to operator mode will not interfere with Elude's functionality, and casting abilities will not interfere with restraint decay in any way. Each attack evaded erodes Baruuk's restraint by 1.2%. However, Elude does seem to have a maximum decay rate, and it's around approximately 10% per second. With this cap in place, there will come a point where additional evaded attacks just won't matter. For Elude's mod scaling, efficiency affects the initial casting cost and energy drain. However, since it's a channeled ability, duration will also affect the energy drain cost, and range affects the angle of Elude's effect, and has a breakpoint of 200% range, as that's when Elude reaches 360 degrees of coverage. Any more than 200% range is wasted on Elude. And like I mentioned in the passive section of the video, the restraint eroded per attack is static and cannot change. Assume this is the case for every other ability going forward. Elude defines the attack conditions as any form of firing a weapon or during any melee animation. Charging up a shot doesn't count, like say on bows, or the charge up of the alt attack on the Stalta or Queller or Epitaph, for example. And despite what the wiki says, the same logic applies for melee heavy attacks. The 0.2 second delay for the protective effect starts once the gun has stopped being fired, or after the melee attack animation is finished. I put emphasis on the term hard attack earlier because Elude will only protect against things that can hit you, like projectiles and melee weapons. It cannot protect you against things like explosive damage or other forms of area damage or various status effects. You still need to be wary of the damage over time effects, say from bombards, napalms, Xmas units and their various abilities, but those are all things that you're probably used to paying attention to, as I'm assuming you watching this means you've either managed to get yourself a Baruuk or Baruuk Prime, or intend to do so soon, so you've probably encountered these enemies before. It's best to see Elude as not so much a tool for damage negation or face tanking, but rather as a tool for quickly getting Baruuk's restraint down, especially when it's a lower level mission. Elude is a channeled ability, meaning you need to be aware of when you're using it, and you need to cancel it yourself. Otherwise, it'll simply drain your energy. Just like other channeled abilities, it also comes with all the penalties a channeled ability has on various methods of energy regeneration, which is essentially canceling all energy over time buffs you can get from allies, Xeneric, auras, energy restores, and so on and so forth. The only thing that will give you energy while a channel ability is active are energy orbs. Equilibrium does apply, as well as Arcane Energize and Rage and Hunter Adrenaline. Elude is not my favorite ability. Hi, just a quick note from post. I'm almost done editing the video, and since I've made this point here, I've actually kind of changed my mind on Elude. You're about to hear me go off on why I'm going to subsume over it and all the reasons I consider doing so. A lot of time has passed since this point, and as I've used it a little bit more, I've actually considered using Elude instead of Lull for reducing restraint. Using Lull is still viable, but I've just started to grow accustomed to how fast Elude can do it. So as you keep on watching, just kind of keep in mind that I've changed my stance on Elude a little bit, and I'm probably going to start using it more often. My apologies for the interruption. For me to make use of it, I really feel like I need to stop, put my back to the wall, and let the enemies gun at me for a bit. All while I mind the attack angle, and watch for gunners and bombards so I don't get smacked by their AoE attacks. However, the fact that it continues to work while the operator is active is nice, and allows me to maintain some level of productivity in the downtime. or just guarantees that Baruuk doesn't take damage from other sources while using Elude. Since I don't generally prioritize range, I will still take some amount of damage from my back if I keep moving. And while that shouldn't be an issue with his full suite of damage reduction being active, it's still annoying being unable to attack and keep some of the heavier units at bay. The best condition I've experienced for Elude to do some decent work was when I could get a handful of units with a rapid fire weapon to focus on me, which sometimes feels harder than it should, especially in a public mission. But when it does work, Restraint tanks pretty quickly, which is always satisfying to see. However, there is that 10% per second limit on how fast Elude can reduce Restraint, so it feels a little too restrictive for me to justify spending energy on, as I often play with little to no duration and stay around base efficiency. Elude still does have its applications, and very decent reasons to use it though. If you're playing a lot of low-level missions and often find yourself facing limited spawn rates, patchy enemy density, or struggle to draw enemy focus from other allies, it's kind of the only thing you can count on if you want to get to below 50% restraint reduction, at least without frantically running around looking for groups of enemies to spam Lull on. But comparing it to his second and third abilities, it is the most efficient way to reduce restraint when looking at it through the lens of restraint reduction per energy points spent. Even with that being said, I still choose to subsume over it. But while working on this script, I've done around 2 group level cap runs with Umbral Nova and Gamble using Baruuk. And in both of those runs, I did find myself struggling to keep my restraint below 50%, at least when using my general restraint reduction strategy. I even found myself nearly running out of restraint when I wasn't paying attention on a couple different occasions. When this happened, I had to very quickly shift focus from playing the game to running around to other rooms seeking out lone groups of enemies to cast Lull on, only getting me back down to around the 50% mark because each group was fairly limited in size. After experiencing this on 2 different level cap runs between both the Grineer and the Corpus factions, I found myself thinking about actually running Elude for these missions. However, it would be kind of a pain for me because of how I have my Helmeth ability set up on him, and changing it would mess things up. So if/when I do it, again, I'll probably just eat the cost and materials to remove and resubsume the ability into the correct slot, but for 99% of my use cases, I find that I'm able to keep my restraint below 50% to 70%, without much issue when I'm not using Elude. So I'm just going to elect to continue to run with my current setup in every other case except for level cap runs. Also, at the time of recording, there is no augment available for this ability. Baruuk consumes 50 energy to cast a calming wave over an area of 25 meters that lingers for 5 seconds. Lull cannot be cast again until the time on the wave from the first cast is finished. Enemies who see or are aware of Baruuk's presence, who enter the area affected by Lull, will gradually slow down and fall asleep for 20 seconds. Each enemy affected by Lull will reduce restraint by 0.8%, and you cannot gain more restraint reduction on enemies that are already sleeping from Lull. However, enemies that are under sleep abilities from other frames, say Equinox's Rest or Avara's Sleep Arrow, can reduce restraint. Sleeping enemies are inflicted with a state of amnesia, causing their alertness level to reset the moment they fall asleep. Enemies will awaken early when damaged by anything at any amount, suffering a disorientation for about 3 to 5 seconds. The timer on this ability is only for the wave duration. There is no visible timer to keep track of the sleep duration on enemies themselves. Duration increases the duration of both the wave that puts enemies to sleep and the sleep duration on the enemies. Range affects the radius of the wave, and efficiency reduces cost. Strength has no effect on this ability. This is the ability I primarily rely on for restraint reduction. In low-density missions, this ability will not be as economical as Elude for eroding restraint, as the casting cost won't justify the amount of restraint it will erode with so few enemies present. Of course, the opposite is true in higher density missions, but even with huge crowds, it's still my recommendation that you don't go below 100% range, and even consider having at least a little range installed, as it does massively improve the restraint reduction on a single cast. I did run a low range build for a while, and honestly I was just fine. I just decided that I liked having a little bit more reach with my Lull, hence my suggestion. Lull has a full body cast animation, meaning it will interrupt things like reloading or charging a shot, and you can't fire or move on the ground while it's being cast. But you can cast it in the air, during an aim glide, while sliding, and even during a wall latch, so it shouldn't feel too intrusive. There are some notable benefits to the aim glide approach though. For one, it allows you to keep moving, which is always a plus in this game, but it also gives you better coverage when using it. You see, Lull has a line of sight check on cast, and it would make sense that being in the air would give you a better visual on all the enemies in the area, bolstering the effectiveness of the cast. One cast of this ability in any still path crowd is usually enough to erode as much of a quarter of the restraint meter, which makes it incredibly easy to maintain. The crowd control it provides is also a nicety in active missions like Void Cascade or Conjunction Survival during those periods where you're inundated with an Acolyte, Thrax units, and Sentience. Generally though, I, along with many others, actually choose to opt for a negative duration build. This allows me to cast Lull more frequently. In pretty much 99% of the missions I do, it does nothing to make things more difficult, as killing everything is pretty much a joke for the first few hours of Still Path. However, in hyperactive missions, especially one I mentioned before, Void Cascade, I've actually aimed for neutral duration at the very minimum, as that mission gets overwhelming real quick. I still struggle to go past 20 to 30 minutes solo. In most Still Path endurance, for me that's an hour of survival or endless missions I enjoy, I don't find it necessary to have any duration at all. The frequent casts let me keep the DR from my eroded restraint to a pretty consistent 40 to 47-ish%, and that's just because a full constant 50% damage reduction is only when it's 100% eroded, which is not often and not for long when it is. And on top of that, negative duration has absolutely zero impact on the entirety of his kit, excluding Elude, which I don't use. If you have it equipped, it's just going to make it less energy efficient. Remember, the restraint, consumption, and erosion rates are fixed, so pushing or dumping any stat won't make any of the abilities consume or erode the restraint meter any differently. There are a few grievances I have with Lull, and there are other functionality-related details that are important to note. First, this ability highlights one of the two major instances of conflicting design with Baruuk. Lull is an ability that is supposed to crowd control the enemies by putting them to sleep, or putting it differently, it's an ability that makes the enemies not shoot you. This is in direct conflict of what Elude wants. If the enemies are asleep, there are fewer enemies to erode your restraint using Elude. It's not that much of a deal for me. Like I said earlier, I usually remove Elude from his kit, but in early missions, or perhaps for you, this will be an annoyance. Second, there is a line of sight check on this ability, meaning that if an enemy is behind a wall or a corner while still in range of the cast, they won't be affected. If the wave is still present, and the enemy comes out into its area, they will then be affected. You'll notice that sometimes after the initial cast of Lull, the meter will drop a few extra points before the wave duration expires. That's just the wave affecting a few more enemies you didn't have visual on when you cast the ability. Third, the amnesia function on the ability, you can pretty much disregard it in 99% of scenarios. It can be nice for leveling weapons with a stealth affinity multiplier technique, as the alert status on the enemies is set to unaware when they fall asleep. However, you have to be confident that you can kill the enemy in one shot, and you also want to be sure that you are the only thing that can inflict any damage, as even small amounts of damage from status priming tools or the spores from a Panzerwurfelpfeile will wake the enemies. In fact, bringing a Panzer or any other offensive companion will actively nullify the sleep CC, because any active sources of damage will instantly wake the enemies the moment they fall asleep. When enemies wake from damage, they will be disoriented for about 3 to 5 seconds, during which the enemy's status is still unaware, but despite this you will no longer be able to gain the stealth kill affinity multiplier, or if you have it, you will lose it upon killing this enemy. Keep in mind that there are some cases you'll encounter in the game that simply prevent enemies from entering the unaware state. The first of which is when the location's alarm system is activated. When the alarm is triggered, all the enemies will go into a cautious alert state, wherein they know you are present, but do not have an active visual on you. Once the alarm goes off, all the sleeping enemies are forced into the cautious state. To get the unaware state back, you must hack the console to clear all the alarms, wait for the enemies to regain consciousness, and then cast Lull again. The second case is in mission types like survival or defense, where enemies just cannot be set to unaware. The way I understand it is that there is either an active enemy for the enemies to be aware of, like a defense target, or the alarm system is always on from the start of the mission in survival. And for the mission to flow properly, the alert is always set to at least cautious, and I imagine this has something to do with the AI pathing. Whatever, just know you can't get the unalert status under these circumstances. I'll be honest with you, I only use this ability for reducing restraint and sometimes CC. Everything else I mentioned, it's always been pretty much useless for me, for at least a few years, so do with that what you will. Performing a finisher on or killing a sleeping enemy will re-trigger Lull for 100% of the remaining duration. It also gives Lull plus 50% more duration. Editor's note, I missed something in the wiki. The passive only applies the plus 50% lull duration to the base duration of the ability, which is 20 seconds, so it only adds another 10 seconds after mods are applied. Endless Lullaby doesn't complicate things much further, but it does add a few things to note. To start with, all extra casts from the kills will not contribute to reducing the restraint meter. Only the initial cast will reduce restraint. The same slow to sleep function is still there, so the higher the duration is, the more you'll feel the delay on the subsequent casts. Just keep in mind that the line of sight check is still present. Most people who will go out of their way to use this are probably thinking of using it for the stealth kill leveling, because I can't think of much else I'd want to use this for personally, but it does do alright with that purpose. Just keep in mind that stealth in Warframe is grossly inconsistent, and if you really want to do this stealth leveling thing, you can just use Rest from Equinox, or just take an Avara, and you'll have a better time stealth leveling. Baruuk expends 75 energy to summon a protective ring of 8 levitating energy daggers around him. Each dagger in the ring provides him with 10% damage reduction, but keep in mind that the damage reduction this ability provides will cap at 90%. They will leave one by one to disarm the enemy on impact, and they will also explode, dealing 250 blast damage within a 3-meter radius. For every enemy that is disarmed, Baruuk's restraint will be eroded by approximately 1.6%. Strength scaling increases the number of dagger charges Baruuk has on summon. Scaling range increases the seeking radius of the daggers, and of course, efficiency reduces the cost. Okay, look, I'll be honest. This ability is just 90% damage reduction when you have 9 or more daggers. Simply recast it when you have less than that, and everything else about this ability is just not gonna be as important, and you can skip it if you want. The rate at which the daggers seek out enemies seems to be locked at approximately 1 dagger per second, and enemies that have already been disarmed by the daggers in this cast instance will not be targeted by any additional daggers. Like I suggested earlier, this ability is easily recastable at any time, and it will restore the full number of dagger charges. Do note that a new instance of Desolate Hands will cause daggers to retarget previously disarmed enemies. The damage reduction on this ability can never exceed 90%, but you can still possess way more than 9 daggers. Baruuk's daggers will seek out allied units as well, launching one at a time at the same rate to the nearest ally within seeking range and within line of sight. And the daggers seeking your allies will not consume from your dagger charges. The daggers you give to your allies function the same exact way they do for you. They provide damage reduction, 10% each, as well as disarm charges. Each ally can carry up to 50% of the modded charges Baruuk has when he casts it. Once an ally has the maximum number of shared daggers, Desolate Hands will not target them any longer. However, if Baruuk casts Desolate Hands again, they will start targeting that ally once more, and allies will keep all the charges they've gained if Baruuk recasts, so if you cast it, it's not like they're going to lose all their charges. In fact, the enemies disarmed by your allies will contribute to reducing your restraint. The term ally reaches beyond just your Warframe teammates. It extends to companions as well as objects like Eidolon lures and drones, allied invasion units, rescue hostages, Kuva defectors, summoned units such as specters or on-call crewmates. It even applies to defense objectives. This includes the live ones, such as the Arbitrations Defense or the Sortie Defense operatives. Unfortunately though, the defense objectives are capped at 50% damage reduction, but they are still able to take more than 5 daggers. The seeking range of the daggers is doubled when Elude is active. This doesn't seem to apply to the seeking range of the daggers given to your allies though. Also, the blast damage from the seeking daggers will not wake enemies that are sleeping from Lull. The wiki says the seeking radius being doubled by Elude is a synergy, but it actively goes against the interest of keeping the daggers for damage reduction, so this is another case of a very unfortunate design in Baruuk. Okay, look. Desolate Hands is just 90% damage reduction. It's hardly even for your friends, because that rate of 1 dagger per second is asking your friends to be next to you for at least as long as it would take to sound out half of your max dagger count. It isn't bad for defense targets, because 50% damage reduction isn't something anyone's going to complain about, and it's still great for your companions, be it a beast or a sentinel. But with that seeking rate asking for so much time, sharing is just not going to be something you're going to be doing that often. Building for a ton of strength only makes Desolate Hands less trouble to use, as it can provide you with more than 20 daggers if you go above 250% strength. And that's not hard to do with Baruuk. The more strength you have, the more daggers you have, and the more daggers you have, the longer you have to keep the 90% damage reduction, as the extra daggers serve as a really nice buffer. Personally, I don't like going with less than 16, maybe 14 daggers minimum. I mean, any less than those 7 extra daggers I have before I get to 9 daggers would feel like I wouldn't have enough time to get the energy back to cast Desolate Hands again by that point. Building for negative range may be advisable, as it only makes the daggers easier to keep, and negative range does not pose much of an issue for Baruuk in most other regards, especially because it doesn't bother his 4th ability at all. And like I mentioned earlier, I did use a negative range build at one point while using Lull to reduce restraint, and for the most part I was fine. It would still reduce the effective angle that Elude has to function, but overall, I mean, it may be a good idea for you. But before you go dumping range, do be sure to consider how it might impact any subsumed ability you might want to put on Baruuk at some point, before you've committed to an ultra low range build. The default 6 meter seeking range on Desolate Hands feels pretty okay for keeping the daggers without stepping on Lull's restraint reduction capabilities, and you can still get into a pretty big group of enemies whether they're grouped with an ability or otherwise, because the 1 dagger per second loss rate is still pretty slow. And putting it frankly, if you're next to Baruuk, you don't have a second left to live. As far as the disarm function goes, it might as well not disarm anyone, because I promise you, it's hardly noticeable. It's really slow, and the best way to disarm an enemy is to just kill them. You can just cast Desolate Hands, and recast it when it gets to 9 daggers, and that's all it really boils down to. I wish all the time I'd spent getting all the details together for this video on this ability could have been spent on details that were more practical, or had more interesting functions in relation to his overall kit, but they're not. This ability really highlights the biggest issue Baruuk faces, specifically in terms of the design of these first 3 abilities. Baruuk's first, second, and third abilities conflict with each other, and if the function offered from these abilities were more important to his performance in the game, Baruuk would be in a much worse place overall. The interactions between Elude and Desolate Hands is undesirable, as it causes you to lose your damage reduction faster than you would normally, and the only return is you're disarming a few more enemies one by one, and now from further away. Turning on the ability that relies on enemies attacking you, mostly with guns, also functioning to increase the range at which your disarm ability can seek out enemies to disarm, is counterintuitive. This is said while ignoring the fact that disarming enemies is generally not something worth doing, or at least when you're doing it slowly like Desolate Hands does. Doing it en masse all at once is better, but it's still fairly questionable when you have the option to just kill them. If Baruuk had the ability to send out all the daggers he has had active whenever he recast the ability, granting them a greater area of effect for disarming abilities, perhaps at a rate of 2 or 3 enemies for each dagger you have left when you recast, maybe providing another boost to something like his melee combo count, similar to Kalervo's 2, or some other weapon stat, or offered something for his exalted weapon, then it could offer a reasonable incentive to spend the dagger charges while also being able to disarm the enemies at a competent level. The conflict between Elude and Lull isn't as disruptive to the player, as it isn't threatening Baruuk's damage resistance or anything like that, but the fact that they exist next to each other is just kind of puzzling. Again, you using Elude is deciding to draw enemy aggro to you, so you can quickly erode restraint. Casting Lull immediately nullifies the purpose of Elude, because now the enemies that are supposed to be shooting you are going the fuck to sleep. These are just cases of really unfortunate and confusing design. This ultimately results in Desolate Hands being a bad ability that also gives you 90% damage reduction. So, how bad is it really? Personally, the way I've decided to live with these choices being a reality is just by thinking about how it suits his theme. Maybe he struggles with being a pacifist due to some deep inner conflict between his desire for peace and serenity and his very clear talent for ultra-violence. In my mind, no one could have a hyper-lethal disposition without at one point having some amount of want for it. Maybe at one point Baruuk was more like Valkyr, with an anger or a hate to satiate, but has in time grown to be a peace-focused individual who is constantly pushed into obscene acts of ultra-violence. If this were the case, I think it would make sense that he would have these inner conflicts that could manifest as these cases of anti-synergy between his abilities. But that's really just a meaningless observation, and it doesn't change the fact that his abilities function with conflicting design choices that would ultimately just be better if their functions and interactions were executed differently. With his restraint dissolved, Baruuk resorts to ditching his equipped melee weapon for his hands and feet, unlocking his absurd damage potential. Rather than using energy, Serene Storm regenerates his restraint, recovering 4% restraint on activation, then continuously restoring 0.8% per second, giving Baruuk a maximum duration of 120 seconds on Serene Storm, but that's only assuming you don't continue to wear down his restraint as you're using it. This channeled ability does not behave the same as most other channeled abilities, so the usual energy regeneration penalties that exist alongside channeled abilities don't apply here, meaning energy buffs from your allies, energy pads, and the like should still work. It also does not seem to apply to the incarnate evolutions that require an active channeled ability. For channeled abilities to apply to the incarnate evolutions, they need to actively consume energy or shields at a consistent rate. Therefore, Serene Storm is not able to fulfill the conditions for the incarnate evolutions that require channeled abilities. Now, while Serene Storm is active, Baruuk receives an additional 25% damage reduction against enemy attacks at base. However, the damage reduction will only apply when Baruuk is actively using Desert Wind, be it through the quick melee or forced equip melee. Strength increases the damage reduction gained while active, capping at 40% once you reach 160% strength. Strength also plugs into the damage equation when modding for Desert Wind, directly increasing the base damage value of Desert Wind, which is 250 impact. This means the additional strength percentage on Baruuk is functionally the same as mods like Pressure Point, as they both function to increase the base damage in the same exact way. Duration, range, and efficiency have no effect on Serene Storm. So before we go into the details about the ability itself, I want to talk about how Baruuk's damage reduction ultimately stacks up to this point, since we now know all the sources of damage reduction he possesses. Ignoring things like armor, adaptation, and shields, Baruuk has 3 sources of damage reduction that come from just various parts of his kit. The first being his restraint meter, maxing out at 50% damage reduction when fully eroded. The second coming from Desolate Hands, giving us 90% damage reduction, since again you're going to have at least 9 daggers, and that's not a suggestion. And now finally, from Serene Storm, and its max of 40% damage reduction, scaling from Power Strength. Again, you're going to have Power Strength because I told you to. Damage reduction like this stacks multiplicatively. This means we're never really ever going to reach 100%, because that's what would happen if we were adding these values together. With how this works, we can take 2 sources of damage reduction, and for the ease of understanding, let's say they're both values of 50%. The first instance of damage reduction gives us exactly what it advertises, 50% reduced damage from all sources. When we enable the other 50% of damage reduction, we are not going to achieve 100% damage reduction. Instead, that second 50% is going to look at the 50% of damage we are still taking and apply itself to that value. So 50% is just another way of saying half, and we know that half of 50 is 25. With both of our 50% damage reduction buffs active, we get a total of 75% damage reduction. Here's what Warframe's damage reduction equation looks like. If you have multiple sources of damage reduction active, just plug the various values from each source into this equation, and the total damage reduction will be given to you as a percentage. And just to be clear, this is not the only equation that goes into all the sources we have for damage reduction from things like armor and shields. This equation only applies to the same type of overall damage taken is reduced type of damage reduction. I mean, hell, as I was writing the script, our shields went from like 35% damage reduction or something like that all the way up to 50. And that little bump in percentage does apply to the overall picture of damage reduction, and you better believe Baruuk has received some benefit. If you're still curious about other details around damage reduction, including things like armor and shields, I'll leave a link in the description where you can look into it more. So with this knowledge in hand, we can now know how Baruuk has the highest damage capacity of all the frames. His kit alone provides a maximum of 97% damage reduction. We can throw in the theoretical maximum 90% damage reduction adaptation can provide on top of this to get 99.7% total damage reduction. That's a lot of damage reduction. It may not seem like that extra 2.7% would do very much, but in missions like Steel Path Void Cascade, where you're taking a lot of damage very quickly, the difference I feel between 97 and 99.7 is actually incredible. I go from dying after a second or two of focused fire with a 97% to what feels like 4 or 5 seconds with 99.7%. Now, I say it feels like that because this is largely a feeling thing. I did not actively time this, and since Warframe is a fast-paced game, those times are probably much shorter. But what is important is that the fact that the extra 2.7% is much more powerful than you may initially think, because that 2.7% is applying to the top end of damage reduction, and the closer it gets to 100%, the more it seems to matter. There are ways to get all the Warframes into the 99.9999% ranges of damage reduction, but Baruuk will always be able to get just a little bit more. The Engineer has an excellent video on the topic of damage reduction where he tells you how you could get values like that, And if you want to find more ways to tank outside of shield gating, I personally recommend it. Okay, so let's talk about the actual ability now. Baruuk can continue to erode his restraint, even when Serene Storm is active, by continuing to use his other abilities. A nice bonus point is that you don't need to have completely eroded his restraint meter to use Serene Storm. He's free to activate it as long as he has at least 96% restraint. In practice, you can activate it whenever you want, and he can turn it off at any time to stop the restoration of his restraint. But keep in mind that deactivating Serene Storm will wipe all the combo you've gained, meaning you start at 0 each time you activate it. There are some cases where you would want to make that sacrifice, by the way. Serene Storm actually snapshots Baruuk's current power strength, and it maintains its base strength multiplier for the duration the ability is active. A good example to think of is when you're using Molt Augmented. You would use the ability to grow to the 250% kill requirement to get the additional 60% power strength benefit. Then you would deactivate it and cast it again, and now the additional 60% has been added to the fourth ability. Another good example is a Nidus comes along and latches to you. You'd want to cancel and recast to get the benefits of his strength buff. There's the double strength buff that you get from cracking relics, and the Duviri Guard in Lua's conjunction survival modes as well. There's a lot of opportunities like this that you could take advantage of that allow you to extend them beyond their usual duration. Baruuk is still free to use his primary and secondary weapons while Serene Storm is active, and it does activate and benefit from the combo duration of Dexterity Arcanes. While Serene Storm is active, access to his equipped melee weapon is obviously removed, and to mention it again, the damage reduction Serene Storm provides will also be ignored when it is not the active weapon. This does not mean you need to have the melee weapon force equipped, it just needs to be active. If Baruuk is doing his special animation to show that it's active, then you have damage reduction. Proceeding on to the exalted weapon itself. Desert Wind has two vectors for damage. These are the direct hits from Baruuk making physical contact with the enemy, and the ranged waves he sends through the crowd. Both of these vectors kind of follow their own unique set of rules in terms of behavior, so we're going to go over those now. The waves in Desert Wind itself are considered separate entities, and both deal damage separately, but the waves share the same base damage as the direct attacks that release them. The waves will punch through enemies and terrain regardless of thickness up to their maximum range of 20 meters, and the wave damage does not fall off with distance, meaning walls and other barriers are just suggestions to Baruuk. The range of the waves, their flight speed, as well as the slam attack radius are not affected by mods, but adding range mods will increase the range of Baruuk's direct hits. The waves are not capable of building combo and do not benefit from the effects of condition overload. Direct hits from Baruuk, as well as the manual/auto blocking, are capable of building combo, and do benefit from the effects of condition overload. The combo counter does apply a final damage multiplier bonus to both the waves and Baruuk's physical strikes, and you do feel it getting stronger as you build it. I will say I did have some trouble actually demonstrating the combo multiplier applying the damage multiplier to his direct attacks in the sim, as they always seem to hit for the base damage on overguarded enemies, so it might be a sim bug, it might just not apply to the base attacks, but ultimately it's not a real big issue in-game. Later on I'm going to go over some strategy on how to build combo and how to use it in a build, so remember this point in particular as well. Another interesting thing is that enemy projectiles that are hit by the waves Baruuk produces have a 100% chance to be redirected. This is another one of those details that's really hard to notice in-game, but it's still pretty cool. And lastly, all direct hits will permanently disarm the enemy. The wiki claims the waves are capable of doing so, but I don't see the waves really doing it at all. You probably won't notice this much happening anyway, as you'll usually find that the enemies are dead before you can realize they're disarmed. But also pretty cool. Now, like all the modifiable exalted melee weapons we have, there are certain mods that Desert Wind simply is not allowed to use. These mods include the Acolyte mods, which are Blood Rush, Weeping Wounds, Body Count, Maiming Strike, and Focus Defense, any melee combo duration mods with the exception of one, which is Drifting Contact. That one is allowed, and also you cannot equip Amalgam mods. Now, Serene Storm comes with its own stance pre-installed, and all the main combos create a ranged wave, and many of the combos provide multi-hits, and some even have some damage multipliers, all of which are incredibly generous. And I'm going to set up some terminology here just to evade confusion. I'll be calling each instance of pressing the melee button an attack, each instance of Baruuk landing a direct hit, a hit, and each instance of a wave, a wave. Now there's a few rules as well. All of Baruuk's direct hits cause enemies to ragdoll away from him, and all the direct hits will disarm the enemy. The exception to this are units that are resistant to crowd control, like Xmas units or other special units. Anytime I mention a multi-hit, I am talking about Baruuk's direct hits. The wave attacks cannot multi-hit. Okay, let's move on to the actual combos now. The default melee combo contains 4 melee attacks, the second and third of which contain 2 multi-hits of 2 strikes each, adding up for 6 direct hits, and 4 ranged waves. All the damage values here are set to 100%. The first 2 waves stun the enemies with a forced impact proc, and the last 2 ragdoll the enemies. The third wave is more of a subtle knockdown, and it doesn't have a ton of force, but the final push really throws enemies back. The forward melee combo contains 3 attacks, none of which have any multi-hits, any increased damage multipliers, and all have wave attacks attached. The first wave stuns with a forced impact proc, and the last 2 ragdoll and push enemies back. The forward blocking combo contains 4 attacks, the first 3 of which contain multi-hits of 2 strikes each, the last of which is a single palm thrust. Lifting waves are sent with the first 3 attacks, forcing enemies into the air. However, interestingly, these do not behave like the waves used in most of his attacks, and don't seem to affect units protected by Overguard at all. There are also no damage multipliers attached to any of the attacks, and interestingly, the last palm strike is not shown in the wiki's combo layout, but the thrust doesn't have any modifiers attached to it either. And since the waves function to lift enemies into the air, enemy projectiles will not be deflected away. The block combo contains 4 attacks, the first of which has 3 multi-hits of 3 kicks, the second of which has no multi-hits, the third of which has 4 multi-hits of 4 cross jabs, and the last of which has no multi-hits. All attacks generate waves on the final hit of the animation, and are drawn in towards Baruuk, pulling enemies in. The first 3 waves act as ragdoll waves, and the fourth inflicts a forced impact proc. And since the waves function to pull enemies towards Baruuk, enemy projectiles will not be deflected away. The slide attack executes in 1 attack. It contains 5 multi-hits with a full 360-degree coverage, all of which have a damage modifier of 300%. The rotational attacks are followed by an uppercut that lifts the enemy hit directly, as well as summons a wave surrounding Baruuk, lifting surrounding enemies into the air, both of which are also given a 300% damage modifier. The heavy attack contains 2 attacks, and they are the default heavy attacks used for sparring weapons. The first attack is a heel stomp, and has a slam radius attached. This part is difficult to confirm, but the wiki states that the direct hit of the stomp has a 400% damage modifier, and the slam radius has a 500% modifier. The follow-up heavy attack is a series of 4 jabs, and are capable of inflicting the lifted status, but have no damage modifiers attached. For the slam attacks, the direct hit of the slam has a 300% damage modifier attached, and the radial slam has no modifier. The default slam behaves as you would expect, involving knockdowns and some ragdolling within an area of effect. But holding down the aim button causes the slam attack to pull enemies in with a vortex. Both versions of the slam are very well suited for gaining combo, but the pull version is a bit more useful in my opinion. Though the wiki mentions a 1600% increase in total modded damage on ground finishers, I have never once been able to execute a ground finisher with Desert Wind. I'm pretty sure you're just not able to. Luckily, prompted finishers do still work and inflict an additional 6400% to the total modded damage of the weapon. So clearly, as far as the individual hit multipliers go, Serene Storm has some very impressive options. Assuming you're up close and personal to an individual or a group, you're getting at least 200% damage with all of these attacks, since you have 2 instances of damage, being of course the direct hit and the wave. They release in the same place at the same time, might as well just be a 200% damage hit. My personal favorite attack in the stance though is actually the slide attack. This move is so strong I feel it's necessary to give it its own attention for a little bit. Putting it as simply as possible, anyone directly hit with this move is going to evaporate. As Baruuk spins into his target, he gets 5 hits, all at 300% of your modded melee damage. That's a bonus of 1500% right there, or 15 times. That's pretty good. Then Baruuk hops up with the uppercut, lifting the enemy you're hitting, along with the ranged wave attached to that action that lifts everyone around him, both of which are set to 300%. So the target you hit directly is getting hit with 5 attacks at 300%. Then he's hit with a 300% uppercut and a 300% lift wave. Ignoring the messy nature of math and Warframe and the fact that this is not being actually calculated and it's just kind of theoretical, it leaves us with a 7 times 300%, which comes out to 21 times original damage. And that's not accounting for like a specialized condition overload build. That would also very well boost the power of the 5 hits you can directly nail on that one enemy, and also how the lifted status is considered by condition overload. This slide attack is frankly an affront to God. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, it's just that good. So the Serene Storm Augment. Desert Wind is granted 250% additional status chance, and changes its damage type to match enemy weaknesses. This is obtainable from New Lullaby or the Arbiters of Hexus. This augment enables Desert Wind to achieve some pretty appealing status chance percentages, and in fact, once you have Reactive Storm, you're able to ditch the dual stat elemental mods and go for the higher damage 90% elemental mods. This is the case because the status chance this mod provides Serene Storm is actually affected by ability strength, so the more strength you have, the more status chance you get. For a closer look on how the numbers work with this, take a look at this equation. If we're using a maxed Intensify and Drifting Contact, Reactive Storm's stat bonus is going to be as shown here, resulting in 69.7%. To achieve 100% status chance without any status chance mods, your ability strength must be at least 227%. With this amount of status viability, Condition Overload kind of becomes a little bit more relevant when you intend to prioritize direct hits, be that with heavy attacks or slide attacks. The way Reactive Storm works is by changing the base impact damage value on the fly depending on the first enemy hit, either by the direct hit or the wave. Impact damage mods no longer have any effect after this change, so don't use physical damage mods to increase the base damage. If the damage becomes a primary element, it will combine with another modded primary element. The first example of this is, say, Robotic Health, which has the biggest weakness to electric damage, with a 50% increase. Having only modded heat on Desert Wind will result in robotic damage after hitting a MOA without shields, taking radiation damage, as that's the product of combining heat and electric damage. Now, the first attack when casting Serene Storm with Reactive Storm might as well be the same as attacking without the augment. It will only deal impact. However, the enemies hit by an attack will dictate the element of the attack preceding the first. I spawned a collection of enemies, a crewman, a gunner, and a bombard in the sim to demonstrate more of this kind of behavior. After the first strike to the corpus, the damage was set to magnetic, and this applied to all the enemies caught in the waves in range behind the crewman. In this case, it was the gunner. Each hit chooses the element and dictates how to adjust the element for the next attack. As far as the Xmas units are concerned though, the waves will not adapt to any kind of damage, as Reactive Storm is not able to switch to void damage for Overguard. It'll basically revert to being an impact damage hit, or at least just behave that way. But overall, Reactive Storm just kind of seems to put a buffer function on the waves to determine the damage type it should adopt for each hit. The damage type will reset to impact when Serene Storm is deactivated. The adaptive damage has the potential to become any damage type, except for void damage, but due to the known health and armor and shield type values found on enemies in the game, it cannot become true damage, void damage, cold damage, turn back into impact, or naturally become heat or puncture without arcanes. In cases where damage types are tied, it will prioritize physical types first, then primary elements, and then secondary elements last. This can only naturally occur for flesh, where damage becomes toxin, and infested flesh, where damage becomes slash. While the wiki states that there is a bias to the order it chooses, it kind of seems to me that the element is just set by who the wave hits first. Was any of this necessary to know? No. Do these findings become super relevant in game? Equally no. But I had questions, so I got answers. Now you have them too. Now, going back to the topic of getting certain damage types from arcanes, there's only one way we can intentionally influence the damage type chosen by Reactive Storm, and that is by using techniques that involve altering damage resistance. There aren't many ways to alter an enemy's set damage resistance, but we have two operator arcanes that are capable of doing so, and we have one ability that we can subsume that can increase the vulnerabilities already present. Just so you're aware, I don't have access to these arcanes myself, so I can't demonstrate their effectiveness to you. The arcanes that are able to adjust damage resistance are Magus Accelerant, which reduces an enemy's resistance to heat damage by 65%, and Magus Destruct, which reduces an enemy's resistance to puncture by 65%. Once again, my go-to for deeper level in-game information, Gamble, has made a separate video on Baruuk utilizing Magus Accelerant to force heat procs on enemies without using any heat mods at all. Once again, you'll find the link in the description and in the little top corner up there. The subsumable ability that plays with damage resistance is actually Atlas's Petrify. Petrify doesn't alter the elemental weaknesses on the enemies. Instead, it amplifies the weaknesses they already possess. The wiki states that petrified enemies have their damage type modifiers increased by 50%. Damage type modifier works by increasing the modifiers by plus 50% up to plus 100%. This is additive with existing values. For example, cloned flesh is 75% weak to viral and 50% resistant to gas. Once petrified, it becomes 100% weak to viral and 0% resistant to gas. That's a 14.3% increase in viral damage and a 100% increase in gas damage. This is more effective on resistant enemies and less effective on already vulnerable enemies. This will not apply to armor, where it would then have a multiplicative effect. I have not tested a build with Petrify. This video has taken long enough to put together without testing it, but it was one of the things I considered in the early stages of researching Reactive Storm. I'm interested to hear any findings you have in this particular application. That is, if you choose to experiment with it. I welcome you to leave a comment about it. Or you can find me on Discord. More specifically, you'll probably find me in Umbral Nova's Discord server. You're welcome to grab my attention through that route. Just have the courtesy to tell me if you're coming from here. I can't really engage with a random DM without knowing why you're talking to me in the first place. Ultimately, Reactive Storm is not necessary to make Baruuk an absolute monster in 95% of the game. However, it will become necessary once you enter the lower middle to high level still path missions and make your way to level cap territory. If you find that you're not ranked with the correct syndicates to obtain it, you're probably at the stage in the game where you can scrape through your incredibly unorganized inventory to find something to sell for 15 platinum. If someone is asking you for more than that, they are being disingenuous. And now we can move on to the part that I'm sure many people skip to. My builds. Both for the ones that I use for Desert Wind and what I use for Baruuk himself. After that, we'll talk about some Subsume ideas, and then we can leave the video there. You didn't skip, right? Okay, good. Just kidding, you can skip if you want. Let's talk about modding his 4. But before we do that, I want to go over a few things. First, we have a lot of strength, almost 300%. Because that's just what Baruuk wants. Yeah, here's a little sneak peek. We can look at this for a little bit. Molt Augmented is superfluous. Doesn't need to be here, but it is. Arcane Strike. It's just attack speed on melee weapons. Pretty sure all my builds have this, just because Baruuk does the melee a lot. So there's that. Adaptation or Augur Reach here. Probably Augur Reach if you want to go high level. Adaptation if not. These are the flex slots for where we're gonna put the augment later. You can do Augur Reach. Adaptation just gets you that extra little bit of damage reduction, but it's not necessary for most of the game. All right. Next up, next point of view here, we have Naramon. Problem with Naramon, you kind of give up on killing anything with your operator. I mean, at least with my amp. My amp, I think, isn't that great. But like, you don't have Unairo's armor strip. You don't have Void Strike, so you're gonna struggle with that a little bit. But we're using Naramon for one power spike, so we can keep our melee combo counter. It's very nice. But also Opening Slam. Opening Slam, you just, initiate a slam as the operator while you're in the air, and you get double combo count gain for 2 seconds. That's pretty good. Especially on Baruuk. Now then, let's talk how we mod. First things first. We want base damage. Now, we already have like 198% because we're at 298 right now. So that's already more than this. So it's not out of the question that you might want to try something else, like maybe Condition Overload or some other extra. But I would personally do that on like a 300 plus build, where you can get up to 400%. I mean, I haven't tried it without Pressure Point, but I'm sure it works just fine. What's next? Well, we're looking at a crit weapon with minimal status and big damage, especially on that heavy attack. Look at that. 50%. So clearly we're gonna put Organ Shatter and Sacrificial Steel. And if you want, you could just do Sacrificial Pressure. That's allowed. Forma. I don't want to do that. And a little bit less damage, but that doesn't matter on Baruuk. So there's that. Next we have speed. Baruuk hits pretty slow, so we're gonna do speed. Berserker Fury, you have a couple options, right? You have Quickening for extra combo count. You have Gladiator Vice. That won't stack, like the passive won't stack for Baruuk. Like this one will not count as it's on his 4. On your melee weapon, it will work. But the fastest we can get is Berserk Fury in one mod, right? But we're already going to go pretty quick because we have Arcane Strike. What's next? Elements. So let's talk about elements real quick. We have a couple options. So for Grineer, you're going to go Corrosive Revival, right? And if you ask me, you're going to go Corrosive because we're dealing with impact damage. There's no damage over time things going on. Our status is low already. So we're not going to get a ton of Corrosive procs unless we do the 60-60s, which we probably will. 60 and 60. So now we're up to 33%, much more serviceable. But Voltaic Strike could be replaced with Focus Energy. because this gives us heavy attack efficiency. That's pretty compelling, but our status is low, so I'm going to keep that off for now. You can choose differently if you like. I'm going to move this down here. Now what? We are left with 2 mod slots that we can kind of do whatever the fuck we want with. So, I guess before we move on to that, I should mention you just use Toxin for Corpus and Gas for Infested. You should be fine. We could run another element. We could run Heat. This gives us more status and gives us a dot, but not very often, or not as often as we might like. And also, I mean, Heat is just another damage multiplier, right? So more damage. Not a bad idea. Let's take that off for now. What other options are there? Well, there's Life Strike. Baruuk himself has no real way to get health back. So this could make, I mean, with this, heavy attacks could just heal you inherently. What else could we do? Well, we have Reflex Coil. There's our heavy attack efficiency without using focus energy, which is nice. Life Strike, there you go. We're looking pretty good. What else could we do? We could do critical damage. We could throw Gladiator Might on there, go from 3.8 to 5 times. Unless, okay, yeah, 5 times. Nautilus isn't here to fuck it up. Essentially, we have just 2 slots we can do whatever the hell we want with. You could do a Smite mod. I wouldn't you could, and I don't know if I'd say recommend, but unless, like, if you don't have a dot, I mean, it's gonna help, but it's not gonna be huge. With Heat, it'll help a little bit more. I mean, if you're doing extra critical damage, you might as well go Heat. So every time you get a Heat proc, it can scale up faster. Critical damage being up, critical hit, bigger damage. That transfers to Heat. Each stat grows. Each time you hit it, big Heat damage. Not bad. There's, like, we could do attack speed. You could do anything. We could even do range. This makes getting combo a dream for Baruuk. I mean, with, like, on the direct hits at least, right? Especially if you have a way to group enemies up. There's options here. You could do condition overload if you want to focus on, like, heavy attacks and direct hits. But generally, I'd say keep it to, like, you can try the Heat one. Let's run with this. Is there anything else? No, I think we're okay. Let's run with this. So, just be aware. On my Vastalok, I have the Gladiator set. All 3. The rest are whatever. Doesn't matter. As long as you have these 3, and, I mean, hell, we could even equip, instead of Reach, we could do a Gladiator mod here and get another little bump to that. But all you need is 3 to start seeing red crits on his 4. So, let's take a look. We're going to spawn in some level 120s, because this is without the augment, and we're going to just do some heavy gunners and maybe some bombards. All right. We have it reduced a little bit. Let's pause them. There we go. Let's take a look. We're not going to prime or anything like that. So it's going to start off pretty slow. We're getting our corrosive stacks in, though, and we can do some direct hits. Without priming, you're going to struggle a little bit on base still path. Let's prime a little bit. Give them just a couple. There we go. Yeah, see, much better. Oh. It's going to be pretty rough, especially on these heavy guys, because they're not weak to corrosive, right? But we're growing our we're growing our combo. We're at 5x, 6x. We should start seeing, yep, we're getting some reds. Pretty low numbers, though, because these guys are hecka resistant. So you're going to struggle on heavies. Fair enough. Unless, prime them up and give them a direct hit. Try to get a headshot on that slide attack, which you can do. I did it just there. That'll help a lot. Gunners, not a problem. How should we remedy this? I bet we could start taking these guys out even more if we had some heat going. So let's put that on real quick. So Prime Reach really gave us a hand with the heat building. Oh, someone's trying to kill me. We're gonna put Gladiator Might here. No, it's fine. It doesn't matter. Heat. Let's do the 60-60 for more status. We're gonna have 42. This is gonna be much better. Excuse me, I'm busy. Thank you. All right, I'll be right back. We're gonna reduce the restraint again. Nah, you know, let's put it on display. We're gonna get rid of the bombards though, because that sucks for restraint reducing. So gunners it is. Elude. You heard me say it earlier in the video. It's only until recently I start to realize, you know what, Elude's probably fine. I got used to Lull because I liked the pause it gave me, but I don't need it anymore. I don't think. We'll finish it off. The last little chunk. Let's get them all in one spot. Pause AI. Let's see what happens. Turn this on. Now we have heat. I just realized we are without the bombards. Now they're on fire. We're gonna get our dot. If we have a dot, we are probably liable to equip the smite mod. But I mean, we're doing all right. That's without priming. Prime them a little bit. 25k, 29k. Let's get some combo. Lots of ground slams. Pull them in. Make sure you're holding that aim button. Okay, so it's fine. This is about the limit you want to go. Any higher than this is going to be a problem. So let's do 110? Let's do 100. 100 will probably feel better. Put them to sleep. 11k, 6k, that's, yeah, we're already doing much better. Opening slam, watch this. 5k, 6, 7. Didn't mean to do that. 8, 9. Still 9. Opening slam really makes it easier. Like, much easier. Getting 21Ks. All these guys are... Oh, they're all dead. Alright, let's talk to some bombards then. Put them to sleep. 16k off the bat. Not bad. Now, we're going to get corrosive more often than we're going to get heat, because we have two mods that make corrosive. Both of those damage specs are stacking together, so it's going to be about twice as likely as heat, I think, if I'm correct on that. They're going to get more corrosive than you're going to get heat in this case, because the damage layout. But like, that was much quicker, especially because our combo is at 10x. Let's see what a heavy attack looks like on this guy. We're going to prime him up nice and good, even though Condition Overload is not equipped. 5 million. Not bad. Not bad, but we can do better. Before we move on to the Augment, let's just take a look at the build here. So, there's no duration here. You can cast Lull and it comes back like right away, immediately, right? Immediately. Not bad. Breaking Point, I believe this is... Okay, so this is what it's the same exact build, except we have Archon Vitality and Reactive Storm in place of Adaptation and Thero Strike. Thero Strike is just quick armor strip, returns health, really nice. This one is the same. Now, this one is probably what you'd want for a pillage build, if you have growing power here. Apply status, you're going to get up to, like, what? 348 or so? 340, whatever. Augmented. There's another 60 power strength. You immediately have... This is going to get you a little bit over 400% strength, meaning you can put pillage here and full strip everyone. Easy. Right? Not bad at all. Alright, so for the Augment build now, we're gonna switch on over to Breaking Point. No, we're not. We're gonna go just the Reactive Storm, put that here. Immediately. That's the only change we're gonna make. We do have, I forgot to mention, we do have primary dexterity in our first primary weapon, just because it can be there. If you don't have Naramon or Power Spike, first off, you should work to get it. It doesn't take too long to get a couple of them. You don't need like max rank. It just helps. But if you don't have it, you can do the Seed, or like, again, any weapon. Baruuk doesn't particularly care. This one's just an easy primer and dexterity just for extra combo duration. And if you have the extra slot and you care, you can put Drifting Contact in one of these. Now, since we have the Augment, look at this strength. Look at our status. We're at 153% status. That's a lot. So really, we can just take these and make them the 90% mods. Easily. But we're not going to change anything. Let's take a look. Did I mention, by the way, that we're still on level 100? This is going to be a massacre. Already, the heavies are going down. And that's without any combo. Let's get some combo then. If they can live long enough to help me out with that. 36k. We're already getting huge bonuses from this. We're getting some armor sharp from the heat and from the corrosive, and we're getting two. We're over 100%. We have 50% chance to get 2 status procs on 1 hit. That's a big deal. We just changed the augment. That's it. And now we're gonna change the level. We're gonna go max just for fun. Yeah. Keep their AI paused. Opening slam just for the grand opening. There we go. Look at this. We're at 20k, 14k. It's hopeless. It's literally hopeless. The heat just eats them alive. Radiation sometimes, because we proc on them. Now, I need to mention, with the way that the augment works, you're going to notice the mods, like the damage types you modded for, are going to show up more than the adaptive damage, but it will still be there. You'll see it sometimes. Again, all we did was change the augment. This leaves the question, is the augment necessary? No. No, it's not, but it's a really big help. Real big help. Let's get that max combo. Come on. You. Alright, we're at max combo. Perfect. 11k, 50k, 20k. Yep. Each time we got some corrosive on him, so the damage just went up. Again. Now, you could put on viral for this, now that we have heat. I mean, the corrosive is helping get it down, but the viral will make the heat procs scale a little bit faster, maybe. But, yeah, let's try that. No, let's not. You can try that yourself if you like. Is it clear, though? Have I demonstrated enough? Want to see something funny? I think that was lower than the last one. Was it the other one at like 5 mil? Point is, Baruuk Augment, good. Very good. Like, really, really, really good. So, how does the build change when you have the Augment equipped? Like, it kind of doesn't. You put Fever Strike on, you put Focus Energy for heavy attack efficiency, and Molten Impact. Oh, we have 20% less status. Oh, that's fine. We got big damage now. Alright, so the main difference is that we switched to the bigger damage mods. We're off the 60-60 mods. Our electricity mod is the focus energy, so we have heavy attack efficiency if we want it. Let's take a look. Let's turn on the 4 first. And get back on the ground. Let's do opening slam, because I fucked that up. Whoop! Man, look at these numbers. They're bigger. Who would have thought? Bigger damage, bigger number. 7x. Yeah. Yeah, they don't live, do they? These are still 180, like 185s. It's hopeless for them. They have no hope. There is little they can do about it. 24k, perfect. Let's try this again. We're at 20 kills. Oh, it's lovely. Oh, it's lovely. They're all gone. Let's prime some of them for fun. Got some 6 digits in there. Another 6 digit. The other one was like 0.5 mil. Do I need to demonstrate any further on why Baruuk good? No, I don't think I do. No, I don't think so. Okay, let's talk about my build. So, yeah, as you can see, I've invested a little bit in Archon shards. These are not necessary, but I'll tell you what they do. These give me 2 more mod slots. These let me take off both Organ Shatter and Gladiator Might. And I still end up with more critical damage than I would with both of them on. So I get more. Easy. So I can put in Smite, I can put in Quickening, and I think those are the 2 I spent the 2 open slots on. We still have our Corrosive Heat. Now, why? We could run Viral Heat, and actually easily, because we have a strip now with Thera Strike. Corrosive just feels better. Honestly, it's direct damage. Viral, you're boosting your damage, but we're still kind of boosting impact and heat and corrosive. We're doing viral, like if you were doing viral, you're doing it to the armor, right? We like Viral not because of the damage matchups it has, but because of its status effect. Corrosive has a good damage matchup, which is more damage on armor, which is what we're mainly fighting, right? Corrosive, for Corpus, you just do Toxin, no big deal. There is something I need to talk about, though. The red crit strategies we have for Baruuk. So I've already gone over it. You build a combo with your 4, well, you have 3 Gladiator Might mods. Sorry, 3 Gladiator mods. 1, 2, 3. And that you can build the rest for whatever the fuck else. It does not matter, right? You build combo with your 4. It's a pain, but you do it, and you're golden. You have red crits permanently. The other way is we use melee guidance. Now, there's a problem with this. We're gonna do strike just for the sake of having it. Melee guidance has a couple problems. So let's take a look at what we need. First off, we need to make sure that we have no dexterity mods. Okay, none there, none there. Okay, so the combo on our 4 is now -1. We cannot build combo on our 4. So we cannot get any multipliers by building combo. The strategy is, let me first reduce my restraint. Okay, now we can talk. Okay, here's the problem. Okay, so here's the strategy. Here's the problem with Gladiator, with the melee guidance strat. Okay, we're gonna take our melee weapon here, and we're just gonna get it up to 12. Easy. Turn on your 4. Look at these, like, big instant red crits. They're kind of small, though, by comparison of our last ones, right? I mean, they're big. They're 15k, 12k, 28k. These are fine. We're doing good. These, we're actually murdering them. Now, I mean, Michelle Malazzo's here, my Volpophyla Panzer. So, I mean, they're getting viral, and I should probably take you off, but I'm not gonna. We are suffering a nerf here. We are not getting extra combo multipliers. Like the multiplier and damage that combo gives your melee weapon. Here's a little picture here. It gives you, like, each combo tier will give you a base, like, after modded damage multiplier. We are not getting that when we're running with melee guidance. We are getting the crit bonus that comes with having a 12x multiplier from our melee weapon, because our Serene Storm is just kind of hijacking that, right? Now here's the other problem. Like, eventually it's gonna go down. It's gonna go down. We're gonna get oranges. Let's see, this is probably fun. Yep, there's an orange, This is still fine. Heaven forbid we're getting orange crits, right? But it's gonna get worse. I thought I had Throw Strike on. They will eventually decay, right? And I guess it isn't a problem as much because you don't have to build combo. But you're gonna turn it off and rebuild it. It's really weird. Now, before, I was worried that with this strat, you were actually not able to heavy attack at all. And I'm pretty sure in the previous update that was the case. But with this, we can. Yeah, now it stays. Beforehand, it would wipe the combo on your melee weapon, or it would think it would wipe, but you'd turn this off, and it would still be at 12x. So you'd have to heavy attack to get rid of it. Then you have to build it again to get 12x, and then turn Serene Storm on again, and then you'd have red crits back. Now you don't have to do that, thank goodness. So that's one reason why it's okay to do this, but you are still nerfing your damage. So is it a problem? For most of you, no, probably not. Because, I mean, I've seen that argument. It's like, it's fine, it's not broken. It's like, no, it's not. It's actually just fine. You're getting free crit tier, right? Free critical tiers, jacking up this damage. The critical damage. But it's not as much as you could get the original way. Right? So be aware of that. Okay, now let's talk about my builds. Why do I use them and for what reason? My go-to Subsume is Thero Strike, but we'll talk about more Subsume options in a little bit. I like Thero Strike because it's a quick, easy, pure armor strip and complete return on health and everything you need, and it's quick. I run this amount of strength. Mult Augmented is honestly kind of superfluous. Like I said earlier, this does not need to be here. It could be literally anything else. It could be Avenger, more crit chance. It could be Blessing, more tank. It could be anything you want. Energizer, but I mean, it's not like Baruuk uses a ton of energy because his 4 is active and then he kills everyone. He's gonna get an energy orb or two. He's just gonna, right? So it's kind of up to you. I like having Augmented because number go up funny. It's fun. I like having adaptation on, as I'm going into higher levels with this, and this lets me go a little further. It's quite simple, really. The Desert Wind, let's take a look. So these two builds are the same, except we're going from Focus Energy to Vicious Frost, and we're getting Viral Heat now. Now, heat is interesting on these builds. Let's do some Manic Bombards, because these guys are real chunky. All right, so you're gonna have to forgive me because I don't want to take Panzer off, so the damage is gonna be a little bit boosted. We'll do one without, don't worry. But watch this. I'm just gonna hit him a couple times. We're building up 7x, 10x. Bam! You hit them, and the heat just jacks up all the way. It's really fun to see. You load them up with heat status. 1, 2, 3, 4, getting like 11. You hit them with the armor strip, they get like a 2 million damage proc. And here's the nice thing about this. I can only get so high with the enemies with these guys. These guys are about as chunky as I can spawn in the sim, right? But on like on the level cap mission, I was getting like 35 million when I was doing this. Which means the harder they are to kill, the more heat damage you can put on them. That's fun. That's a lot of fun. Watch this. Give him some more. 1 million. Damn it. It helps when you prime them. And I'll tell you what really drives that damage home. If you want to get like 7 mil, 8 mil even, if we can get a fucking heat proc, is when we have a lot more critical damage. So instead of just 5 red Archon shards, sometimes it's funny just to do pure heat 8.5 times. Because why not? Hell, let's take off the Vulpaphyla and let's put on Nautilus, because he's a good boy. There he is. And he has Tenacious Bond. Let's see what our funny number is now. 9.7 times. You think that's enough? You think that's enough critical damage? Let's look. let's watch. Hold on. Let me get my restraint down again. All right, so we have just heat on R4 now. Just heat. Nothing else to pollute the system or the proc chances, unless we're probably gonna get some radiation too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just goodbye. Instant 2 million on all of them. That took no effort whatsoever. Now let's get some combo. Why don't we? That would be fun. 10x, 11, 12x, 4 million, 9 mil. I saw 9 mil. Let's look at that again. See, this is just fun. You do this for hours, and you never get bored because you're a maniac. This keeps you happy forever because you like number. 7 mil. Oh. I mean, that killed him without even like stripping the armor. You see my point. It's so good. Baruuk and heat is like heat just goes really well on Baruuk. The heat dot scales a ton. Easy shit. Give me some. I think they just died. There's no corrosive and no viral. Except for on the ones that I primed. I just now remember. Good shit. Come on, all the way, all the way, all the way, all the way. 11 mil, just in 2 hits. I mean, after priming and everything. Not bad, right? Yeah, that's better. We don't even have condition overload on. Let's see what it looks like when we do. 12 mil. Same build. I'm just going to replace one thing. I don't think we need reflex coil, right? Yeah, we're good without that. Put that there, put that there. Let's take a look at the evil that we're about to unleash upon the world. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I did not treat the fort. I'm an idiot. Up and down. Up and down. Up and down. Give me the 12, please. I want the 12, thank you. All right, well, they're all dead anyway. So let's get a fresh batch. Easy. Don't die from the heat proc, please. I want you alive, at least some of you. Goodbye. Yeah, 9-digit, baby. Not 9-digit. Oh, yeah, because we ran out of combo because I don't have any heavy attack efficiency. So you might want a heavy attack efficiency, but like that demo, like easy, like it could have been more. You could have had more stacks on him, right? Do you have any more questions? Like, do you really need any other demonstration? Like, if you want, hey, give me good build. Here's good build. Take this build. Put it on. You want the other good build here? Take it. Fucking pay attention during the video. Why not? Because you skipped here. I know you did. I know you did. I'm going to put a timestamp right there. I know you skipped here. How dare. No, I'm not. You're fine. There you go. Favorite builds. We have Pure Heat, Viral Strip, or Viral Heat, Dot Strip. Dot Strip is just put the damage over time, then strip them, and then they go boom. They die. Here's our Condition Heavy. So we just replace Prime Pressure Point with the Viral. And it has no heat on it. Oh, yeah, because we're priming them with Viral. Yeah, there you go. Killing Blow for extra crit damage. Let's see what this looks like. No, let's not. Yes, let's do. You gotta love Nautilus when he just pulls them all in like that. It's really nice. Don't touch me, please. Direct hits, we're already getting like 5 digits. Okay, we're over 12x. Ow. No, 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 no. My perfect combo. I'm good at this game, I promise. Yeah, there we go. Looks good. And I mean, since we have the armor strip, bam, Viral's instantly more viable. Let's try that again. One more time, just for the folks at home. Let's do Gawk Stat Gunners now. Turn on your 3, I just realized this off. You want to know a little secret? One of the reasons it took me so long to get this fucking video out? Baruuk is so good, you get fucking bored. That's it. That's the problem. That's his biggest problem, aside from all the synergies, like even beyond all the anti-synergies, rather, he has. You get fucking bored. You're too good. You're too fucking cool. That's the issue. I mean, when you look like this, like what problems like could you realistically have? There's your build segment. Want to take a look at the other ones that are kind of out in the open? Here you go. Corpus and Flex. This was just like the mod building demo. There we go. Boop. Here's your Corpus build. Condition Heavy, Pure Heat, Viral Strip, Corrosive Heat. Bam. All done. Now, I mean, there's the Ensnare. You could have this if you want. This was on the Conjunction Survival. Have a little bit of range and some efficiency, but it's not like you really need it. A little bit less strength, but multi-augmented will get you right back up. Archon Vitality. Oh yeah, Archon Vitality with Thera Strike. But then again, in most content, your enemies aren't gonna be able to. They're not gonna be able to get you below that fucking shield line. They're gonna struggle to get your shields down. But that is another way to get more strength on Baruuk. What more do you want? All right, moving on to subsumable abilities now. This segment should be pretty brief. In the build section, I already talked about how I prefer using Thera Strike just because it's a nice quick armor strip, returns health, and it's just simple to use. But we're going to go over a couple more ideas we can try. We'll just push the popular options out of the way. Yes, of course, you could run Nourish or Eclipse. If you're running Nourish, just be sure to run Corrosive or some other element, and Eclipse, I don't know, you could just run that. I won't judge you for doing that. I don't think Baruuk really needs either of them, but if you choose to run them, have a blast. I suppose using Nourish does give you some headroom for modding Baruuk in certain ways. I don't think that's something anyone could really argue against. Perhaps you could try a gas and or electric build, and still retain some comfort knowing that you have Viral equipped by virtue of running Nourish. However, gas and electricity builds would probably benefit from grouping abilities such as Ensnare. I've heard of people using Mag's Pull to bring in enemies for heavy attacks, which does sound interesting and fun, but bear in mind that grouping abilities depend on range, and Baruuk doesn't really want too much of that, given he has Desolate Hands to worry about. So personally, I never gave Mag's Pull too much attention. As of Abyss of Dagoth, Pillage may be a particularly nice fit on Baruuk, as he's one of the handful of frames that generally doesn't feel much in the way of hindrance when sacrificing other power stats in pursuit of unadulterated strength. Honestly, you could feasibly build for a strength rating at or above 320%, and rely on Augmented in conjunction with growing power to achieve the 400% needed to completely strip defenses from enemies in a single cast, and not feel too much worry about the downsides of running that much strength in most other cases. Since Baruuk already has the ability to reach the levels of damage reduction he can, along with the recent buff to damage reduction on shields, it just kind of seems to make sense to give it a try on him, doesn't it? I mean, hell, once your shield's broke, you'd hardly have to panic because you were still able to face tank pretty much everything below 7k long enough to let Pillage do its thing without a lot of range. Personally, I find Pillage kind of clunky, but if you're a fan of running it, then maybe it'd be fun for you to try it out on him. Another interesting pick is Wrathful Advance, as when you cast it, it isn't much different from running the melee guidance strategy I mentioned earlier. However, this time, the red crit bonus isn't static, and you don't have to sacrifice combo for it. So you can actually gain additional critical chance while it's active, which is proven by the exclamation marks that appear as you gain combo, signifying that you are breaching past the 3rd crit tier at 300%, into the 4th and 5th, and even starting reaching into the 6th tier when you reach the upper ranges of the combo meter. But remember, that only works if you have the Gladiator mods equipped on your melee weapon. With 3 of them equipped, I'm able to get 3 exclamation points, but if you have 1 or 2, you might not get quite as high. If you do decide to run this and want to optimize it, I do have a few suggestions that can make things a little better. For one, you should probably subsume Wrathful Advanced over Lull instead of Elude, as it does want some duration, and if you run Primed Continuity over this, your ability to reduce restraint will be significantly hindered by the initial wave duration on Lull, making your restraint reduction process a long and sluggish one. Keeping Elude will nullify that entirely. Second, Wrathful Advance does make it easy to execute heavy attacks, so you may want to consider these build alterations to maximize its potential output. I'd say consider leaving a slot open for Condition Overload, since direct hits from Baruuk take this into account. You will see a considerable uptick in damage when priming enemies before executing them. But before you commit to that, I strongly recommend that you also slot a heavy attack efficiency mod, be it either Reflex Coil or Focus Energy, which I think you should run when you are building for Corrosive and have Reactive Storm anyway. But I'll leave the rest up to you, as this video has gone on long enough, and it's taken long enough for me to produce, and there's no reason to spoon-feed you information when you're perfectly capable of finding things yourself. Hey, I'm glad you made it to the end. This project took way longer than I wanted it to. Like, on the order of a couple months. Of course, I wasn't as productive as I should have been some of those months, but nonetheless, the scope of this project is evident in its length. So, thank you for watching if you've made it all the way till now, because that's a lot to sit through. I hope the information I provided was valuable to you, and that the video, just in general, was worth the wait. I'd like to express my gratitude for the comments and support in the previous videos, even though they were 4 and 6 months ago. The fact that they still get views and comments is really pleasing to me, and I appreciate every single one. The very fact that people were anxiously waiting on this video for so long and being so patient really does mean the world. As far as the future goes, I'm going to do my best to pace myself, and I don't want to compromise on quality, but we'll see how I can adapt with maybe shorter things or maybe more simpler frames. One way or another, I don't intend to stop. Before we close out, be sure to check out the description for the links to the various articles and web pages, but also to the other channels that I've mentioned in this video, most notably Nova Umbral and Gamble. These two have been excellent to me, and I consider them to be good friends. And with all that out of the way, it only leaves one question. Who's next?